The shot rang out across the dusty main street of Sweetwater, Texas. Just as Sophia Blackwood stumbled toward the saloon's wooden steps, her once fine dress stained with blood and trail dust. The year was 1875, and she had traveled over 500 miles to escape a past that had finally caught up with her. Through blurring vision, she saw the batwing doors of the Frontier Saloon swing open as her legs finally gave way beneath her. Vaughn Caldwell had just tied his horse outside when he saw her collapse. Something in his chest tightened at the sight of the young woman crumpling like a discarded handkerchief onto the rough-hewn steps. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, pushing past the curious onlookers gathering in the late afternoon heat. Miss, can you hear me?" His voice was low and urgent as he knelt beside her, gently turning her face toward him. Her skin was pale beneath the grime, but he could see she was beautiful and young, perhaps 25 at most. Her eyelids fluttered. "Please, help me," she whispered before consciousness slipped away from her. Vaughn gathered her carefully into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. "Someone get the doctor," he called out, already carrying her through the saloon doors. Inside, the usual afternoon card games and drinking halted as Vaughn carried the unconscious woman past the bar. The piano player's fingers froze mid-chord, and the tinny melody died away. What in tarnation? The saloon owner, a barrel-chested man named Frank, moved quickly from behind the bar. "Take her to the back room. I'll send for Doc Willis." Sophia woke to the unfamiliar sensation of clean sheets and a soft pillow. Her side ached fiercely, and when she tried to sit up, a firm but gentle hand pressed her shoulder back down. "Easy now. That bullet took a fair piece of you with it." The voice belonged to an older man with kind eyes and a bushy white mustache. "I'm Doc Willis. You're lucky to be alive, young lady." Memories flooded back: the stagecoach, the bandits, the desperate run toward the town she'd spotted in the distance after hours of walking. "The others?" she asked, her throat dry and voice cracking. "I'm afraid we don't know about any others," the doctor replied. "You were alone when you collapsed." "Mr. Caldwell brought you in." A movement by the door caught her attention. A tall man with broad shoulders leaned against the doorframe, his face partially shadowed by the brim of his hat. Something about his stance spoke of strength and quiet authority. "This is Vaughn Caldwell," the doctor explained. "He's the one who carried you in here yesterday." The man stepped forward, and Sophia could see him clearly now. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way that city men could never achieve. His eyes were the color of a summer sky, startlingly blue against his tanned skin. "Madam," he said simply, touching the brim of his hat. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she must appear. "Just did what anyone would do," Vaughn replied, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true, not in a frontier town where strangers were often viewed with suspicion. "You've lost a lot of blood," Doc Willis continued, "and that wound needs time to heal. You'll be staying put for at least a week." Panic flashed across Sophia's face. "I can't. I need to keep moving. I have money I can pay for your services." "Money won't help if you're dead," Vaughn said bluntly. "Whatever you're running from can wait until you're strong enough to stand on your own 2 feet." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of someone else who understood what it meant to leave things behind. "You can stay at my boarding house," came a new voice. A plump woman with graying hair pinned neatly under a cap entered the room. "I'm Martha Simmons. Got a clean room with a lock on the door. No questions asked." Sophia felt tears sting her eyes at this unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she managed. Later that evening, after being moved to Martha's boarding house with Vaughn's help, Sophia lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the small town settling for the night. The distant piano from the saloon, occasional laughter, the creak of wagon wheels on the street below. She touched the bandage at her side and wondered how long before she could move on. The men who had attacked the stagecoach hadn't been ordinary bandits, they'd been looking specifically for her. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Miss, it's Vaughn Caldwell. Mrs. Simmons asked me to bring up some supper for you." "Come in," she called, quickly pulling the blanket higher. Vaughn entered, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of stew and a chunk of bread. He set it carefully on the bedside table, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a large man. "Mrs. Simmons says you need to eat to get your strength back," he said, standing awkwardly by the bed. "Are you always this concerned about strangers?" Sophia asked. A half-smile lifted one corner of his mouth. "Only the ones who collapse bleeding on saloon steps." Despite herself, Sophia laughed, then winced as pain shot through her side. "Sorry," Vaughn said quickly. "Shouldn't make you laugh just yet. It's fine. Laughter's been in short supply lately." She studied him openly now. "You're not just a cowboy, are you, Mr. Caldwell?" he shrugged. "I ranch a piece of land about 5 miles outside town. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. And you just happened to be in town when I arrived, needed supplies." His eyes, direct and honest, met hers. "And maybe a drink. It gets lonely out there sometimes." The simple admission touched her. "I understand loneliness," she said quietly. "I reckon you might at that." He moved toward the door. "You should eat before it gets cold. I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." Sophia nodded, surprised to find herself looking forward to seeing him again. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." "Vaughn," he corrected. "Just Vaughn." "Sophia," she offered in return. "Sophia Blackwood," he nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Rest well, Sophia Blackwood." After he left, Sophia ate the stew, the first real food she'd had in days, and found herself wondering about the cowboy with the gentle hands and watchful eyes. For the first time since fleeing Chicago, she felt something other than fear. It wasn't safety exactly, but something close to it. A temporary reprieve, at least. Vaughn rode back to his ranch that night with the image of Sophia Blackwood's face imprinted in his mind. There was a story there, a painful one, if he read the shadows in her eyes correctly. He knew better than to get involved with a woman who was clearly running from something. And yet, something about her called to him in a way he couldn't ignore. As the days passed, Sophia regained her strength. Martha Simmons proved to be a godsend, providing clean clothes and minimal questions. Doc Willis visited daily to change her bandages, and each evening Vaughn would appear with some small offering fresh baked goods from the town bakery, a book from his own small collection, or simply news from around town. On the 5th day, when Doc Willis declared she could move around a bit, Vaughn offered his arm for a short walk down the boarding house stairs to sit on the front porch. "People are curious about you," he said as they settled onto the porch swing. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the dusty street. It's not often a beautiful woman arrives in Sweetwater by collapsing half dead at the saloon. Sophia tensed. What are they saying? Nothing much. Small towns run on gossip, but they respect privacy too. He studied her profile. "You don't have to tell me what you're running from, Sophia, but if you're in danger, I'd like to help." She was quiet for so long that Vaughn thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My husband was murdered in Chicago. They think I did it." Vaughn didn't flinch. "Did you?" "No." Her eyes, when they met his, were clear and direct. "But I know who did, and they know I know." "The men who attacked your stagecoach," she nodded. "They work for my father-in-law. He had his own son killed over business dealings. I saw the man he hired leaving our house that night. I recognized him. He'd been to dinner at our home before." And now they're trying to silence you. Yes. My father-in-law is a powerful man in Chicago. The police won't touch him. She twisted her hands in her lap. I had to run. I took what money I could and headed west. Vaughn absorbed this information silently. Why Sweetwater? A sad smile crossed her face. I didn't choose it, it chose me. I was headed to San Francisco, but after the attack. She shrugged. Here I am. Here you are, he agreed softly. The next morning, Sophia woke to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Pulling on the simple calico dress Martha had lent her, she made her way cautiously to the top of the stairs. Don't care what authority you claim to have. That was Vaughn's voice, hard and unyielding. You're not going up there. I have a warrant for her arrest. The other voice was unfamiliar with an Eastern accent. Sophia Blackwood is wanted for the murder of her husband, Gregory Sullivan, in Chicago. Sophia's heart pounded against her ribs. How had they found her so quickly? That may be, Vaughn replied, but in this town we respect the law. That means you take your warrant to our sheriff and he decides how to proceed. Stand aside, Cowboy. This isn't your concern. Like hell it isn't. Sophia descended the stairs, her legs shaking but her head held high. It's all right, Vaughn, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. 3 men stood in the boarding house foyer. Vaughn, his stance protective, an expensively dressed man with a thin mustache whom she didn't recognize, and behind him, a face that made her blood run cold, James Porter, her father-in-law's personal bodyguard. Mrs. Sullivan, the mustached man said smoothly, I'm Detective Harold Reed from the Chicago Police Department. You're under arrest for the murder of your husband. It's Blackwood, she corrected. I never took his name. Her eyes fixed on Porter. And I see Richard Sullivan still sends others to do his dirty work. Porter's expression remained impassive, but his eyes held a cold threat. I'll go with you to see the sheriff, Sophia said to Reed, but I want Mr. Caldwell to accompany us. The detective looked like he might object, but Vaughn's hand had already moved to rest meaningfully on the gun at his hip. Lead the way, Vaughn said pleasantly. Sheriff Tom Wilson was a former Texas Ranger with a reputation for fairness. He studied the warrant with a frown while Sophia explained her situation, this time including details about Porter's presence and her suspicions about why her father-in-law wanted her silenced. This warrant seems in order, the sheriff said finally, but I'm troubled by a few things. Detective Reed. First, why would Chicago PD send someone all this way for a murder case? Second, who's paying for this expedition? And third, who exactly is your companion? Reed shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Porter is assisting in the investigation. He works for Richard Sullivan, Sophia interjected. The man who had his own son killed. That's slander. Porter spoke for the first time, his voice cold. Is it? Vaughn asked. Seems mighty convenient that Sullivan's man is here to bring back the only witness to his crime. Sheriff Wilson leaned back in his chair. Here's how we're going to handle this. Mrs. Blackwood will remain in my custody while I wire Chicago to verify this warrant and get some answers. Detective, if that's what you really are, you and your friend can wait at the hotel. This town, this jail, and this prisoner are under my jurisdiction now. Reed's face reddened. This is outrageous. I have a valid warrant, and I have questions about its validity, Wilson cut him off. This is my town, and we'll do this my way. Later, in a cell that the sheriff had tried to make comfortable with extra blankets and a decent meal, Sophia sat with her back against the wall, exhaustion washing over her. You believe me, don't you? She asked Vaughn, who stood on the other side of the bars. I do, he said simply. And more importantly, so does Sheriff Wilson. He's a good man. He'll get to the bottom of this. They'll kill me before I ever reach Chicago, she whispered. You don't know what Richard Sullivan is capable of. Vaughn's expression hardened. "They'll have to go through me first," he promised. "And I'm a lot harder to kill than most folks think." That night, Vaughn took up position in a chair outside the jail, his rifle across his knees. He had no official standing, but Wilson hadn't asked him to leave. Sometimes, in a town like Sweetwater, the law needed whatever help it could get. Around midnight, a soft sound from the alley beside the jail caught his attention. Moving silently, Vaughn positioned himself in the shadows and waited. Moments later, a figure slipped around the corner porter, moving with the stealth of a man accustomed to night work. "Looking for someone?" Vaughn asked, stepping into view with his rifle aimed at Porter's chest. Porter froze, then slowly raised his hands. "Just taking a walk. With a knife in your boot and a gun under your coat. Must be expecting trouble on your stroll." Porter's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Cowboy. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Vaughn replied. "A hired killer who's about to spend the night in the same jail as the woman he came to silence." The commotion brought Sheriff Wilson out, and Porter soon found himself occupying the cell across from Sophia's. Detective Reid, roused from his bed at the hotel, blustered and threatened, but could do little in the face of Porter's incriminating midnight activities. The next morning, Wilson received replies to his telegrams. "Well, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, entering the cell area with several papers in hand, "it seems you've been telling the truth. Chicago PD confirms there's an investigation into Richard Sullivan regarding his son's murder. They also inform me that no Detective Reid was authorized to bring you in and the warrant appears to be falsified." Relief flooded through Sophia, making her legs weak. "What happens now?" "Now," Wilson said, "Mr. Reid and Mr. Porter will be escorted to the territorial prison to await charges of kidnapping, forgery of official documents, and attempted murder. And you, madam, are free to go." Outside the jail, the bright morning sunlight seemed to represent a new beginning. Sophia turned to Vaughn, who had been her steadfast protector through the ordeal. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "No need for thanks," he replied, "but I do have a proposition for you." She raised an eyebrow, waiting. "My ranch needs a housekeeper. It's not fancy work, but it's honest, and you'd have a safe place to stay until you figure out your next move." He looked almost shy as he added, "It gets lonely out there, and I reckon you could use some peace and quiet." Sophia considered the offer. She had planned to continue west, to lose herself in the anonymity of San Francisco, but the thought of a quiet ranch, away from prying eyes with this man who had risked himself to protect her. "I accept," she said, "though I should warn you my cooking skills are limited." Vaughn's smile lit up his face. "I've been eating my own cooking for 3 years. Anything would be an improvement." 2 days later, after purchasing a few necessities with what remained of her money, Sophia rode beside Vaughn in his wagon toward his ranch. The miles of open land stretched before them, dotted with mesquite and live oak trees. After the confines of Chicago and then the boarding house, the vastness was both intimidating and exhilarating. "There it is," Vaughn said as they crested a small rise. "Circle C Ranch." The ranch house was modest but solid, built of stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 2 sides. A barn and corral stood nearby, along with a bunkhouse for the handful of ranch hands Vaughn employed. "It's not much compared to what you're used to," he said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's perfect," Sophia breathed and meant it. After months of fear and uncertainty, the sturdy little ranch house looked like a sanctuary. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that brought Sophia a peace she hadn't known in years. She rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for Vaughn and his 3 ranch hands. During the day, she cleaned the house, learned to bake bread in the wood stove, and gradually made the Spartan ranch house more homelike with small touches, wildflowers in a jar on the table, curtains sewn from fabric purchased on their weekly trips to town. Vaughn, for his part, found himself looking forward to returning to the house each evening. Where once he had eaten quickly and alone, he now lingered at the table, sharing stories of his day and listening to Sophia read aloud from one of his books. Sometimes they simply sat on the porch after supper, watching the spectacular Texas sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Sophia was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard riders approaching. Fear, never far below the surface, surged through her. She dropped the sheet she was holding and rushed toward the house, only to collide with Vaughn, who had come around the corner at a run. "Stay inside," he ordered, his hand already on his gun. "Could be nothing, but it could be Sullivan's men," she finished, her throat tight. She watched from the window as Vaughn strode toward the approaching riders. There were 3 of them, and even from a distance, she could tell they were rough-looking men, the kind who made their living with guns rather than honest work. Words were exchanged, too distant for her to hear. One of the men gestured toward the house, and Vaughn's stance shifted, becoming more aggressive. Then, faster than she could follow, Vaughn's gun was in his hand. For a terrifying moment, Sophia thought there would be a shootout right there in the yard. But after a tense standoff, the riders backed down, turning their horses and riding away. When Vaughn returned to the house, his face was grim. "Bounty hunters," he said. "Sullivan's put a price on your head, $5,000 for bringing you back to Chicago. Said you stole family jewels when you ran." Sophia sank into a chair. "It never ends, does it? He'll keep sending men until one of them succeeds." Vaughn knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "I won't let that happen. You can't fight them all, Vaughn, and I can't ask you to try." Tears filled her eyes. "I should leave. Go somewhere they won't find me, or you know." His voice was firm. "Running isn't the answer. We need to end this once and for all." "How? Sullivan is untouchable in Chicago." "Maybe in Chicago, but this is Texas." Vaughn's blue eyes blazed with determination. "And in Texas, we have our own way of dealing with men who think they are above the law." The next day, Vaughn rode into Sweetwater to speak with Sheriff Wilson. Together, they devised a plan. Wilson would telegraph the Texas Rangers and the federal marshals with the information about Sullivan's bounty and false accusations. Meanwhile, they would set a trap for any bounty hunters who came looking for Sophia. "It's risky," Wilson cautioned. "These men won't hesitate to kill anyone who stands between them and $5,000. "I know," Vaughn replied, "but we can't live looking over our shoulders forever." When he returned to the ranch and explained the plan to Sophia, she paced the small living room, her face pale with worry. "It's too dangerous. These aren't just hired guns, they're killers. Sullivan wouldn't send anyone less." "Which is exactly why we need to stop them now," Vaughn insisted. "Trust me, Sophia, I won't let anything happen to you." That night, unable to sleep, Sophia slipped from the small bedroom that had been hers since arriving at the ranch. She found Vaughn still awake, sitting at the kitchen table cleaning his rifle by lamplight. "You should be resting," he said without looking up. "So should you." She sat across from him, watching his capable hands work. "Vaughn, there's something I need to say." He set down the rifle, giving her his full attention. "If anything happens to you because of me, I couldn't bear it." Her voice caught. "These past weeks, they've meant more to me than I can express. You've given me safety, yes, but also something I thought I'd never have again, peace. Happiness, even." Vaughn reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Sophia, before you came, this was just a place I slept. You've made it a home." Their eyes held, and in that moment, Something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily since the day he'd carried her unconscious form into the saloon. "I need you to know," she continued, "that whatever happens tomorrow or the next day or however long this takes, I've never regretted coming here, being with you." Vaughn stood and moved around the table, drawing her gently to her feet. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "Nothing's going to happen to either of us," he promised. "And when this is over, we're going to have a long talk about what comes next." His lips touched hers, softly at first, then with growing passion as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. In that kiss was promise and hope, and a determination that transcended fear. The trap was sprung 3 days later, when a new group of bounty hunters rode into Sweetwater asking questions about a woman matching Sophia's description. Sheriff Wilson, playing his part perfectly, mentioned that such a woman was living at the Circle C ranch with Vaughn Caldwell. "Course, Caldwell's not a man to trifle with," Wilson added casually. "Rode with the Rangers during the war, handy with a gun, real handy." The bounty hunters exchanged glances but weren't deterred. $5,000 was too much to walk away from. They arrived at the Circle C near sunset, 5 hard-faced men who didn't bother to hide their intentions. What they didn't know was that Vaughn had been warned of their approach by one of his ranch hands stationed in town, or that Sheriff Wilson and 3 deputies were positioned strategically around the property. "Evening, gentlemen," Vaughn called from the porch, his rifle resting casually across his arm. "Something I can help you with," the leader, a scar-faced man with cold eyes, reined his horse to a stop. "We're looking for Sophia Blackwood. Word is she's here. And if she is, we've got business with her, private business." Vaughn's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid the lady isn't receiving visitors today, or any day where you're concerned." "Listen, Cowboy," the man snarled, "we can do this easy or hard, your choice." I was about to say the same thing. Vaughn's voice hardened. "You boys can turn around and ride out now, or you can try your luck against me, my men, and the law of this county." As if on cue, Sheriff Wilson and his deputies emerged from their hiding places, weapons trained on the bounty hunters. "This is an official law enforcement operation," Wilson announced. "You men are under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap and transporting false warrants across state lines." For a moment, it seemed the bounty hunters might fight. But outnumbered and outmaneuvered, they eventually surrendered their weapons and were taken into custody. After they were led away, Sophia emerged from the house, her face pale but resolute. "It worked," she said, almost disbelieving. "It worked," Vaughn confirmed, pulling her into his arms. "And Wilson says the marshals are already on their way to Chicago with evidence against Sullivan. His empire is crumbling as we speak." Sophia sagged against him, relief washing through her in waves. "Is it really over?" "It's over," he promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're free." That night, they celebrated with a simple dinner that somehow felt like a feast. The weight that had pressed on Sophia for so long had lifted, leaving room for something new to grow in its place, something bright with possibility. As they sat on the porch afterward, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky, Vaughn took her hand. "I meant what I said about having a talk when this was over," he began, suddenly nervous in a way she'd never seen before. "Sophia, I know you came here needing a place to hide, and I offered you a job because it seemed the right thing to do. But these past months, they've been the happiest of my life." Her heart quickened. "Mine too," she admitted softly. "I don't have much to offer compared to what you're used to," he continued. "This ranch is modest, and ranching is hard work with uncertain rewards. But everything I have is yours if you want it, if you want me." Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes as she realized what he was saying. "Are you asking me to stay, Vaughn, not as your housekeeper, but as my wife?" he finished, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, Sophia Blackwood. I think I've loved you since I carried you up those saloon steps." She laughed through her tears. "It wasn't the most conventional way to meet." "No," he agreed with a smile, "but I wouldn't change a moment of it because it brought you to me." Sophia turned to face him fully, her hands reaching up to touch his beloved face. "I love you too, Vaughn Caldwell. And yes, I'll stay as your wife, your partner, whatever you want to call it, as long as we're together." His kiss was tender and fierce all at once, sealing a promise between them that neither time nor distance could break. The wedding took place 2 months later in the small white church in Sweetwater. The entire town turned out for the occasion, curious to see the culmination of a romance that had begun so dramatically on the steps of the Frontier Saloon. Martha Simmons had helped Sophia sew a simple but elegant wedding dress of ivory silk, ordered specially from San Antonio. Doc Willis gave her away, and Sheriff Wilson stood as Vaughn's best man. Even Vaughn's taciturn ranch hands had polished their boots and donned clean shirts for the occasion. As they exchanged vows before the pastor, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, the pain and loss, the fear and flight, and finally, unexpectedly, the love and home she had found in the arms of a Texas rancher. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the pastor declared. "You may kiss your bride." Vaughn's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of all the days to come. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, the cheers and applause were deafening. The celebration afterward spilled from the church to the saloon, where Frank had arranged for free drinks and a special dinner. The piano player pounded out cheerful tunes, and couples danced in the cleared space in the center of the room. "Not quite the wedding you would have had in Chicago," Vaughn murmured as they danced slowly together. Sophia looked around at the saloon with its rough-hewn walls and simple decorations, at the faces of people who had become dear to her in such a short time. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "More perfect than anything I could have imagined." Later, as they drove back to the ranch in the wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers by the town's children, Sophia leaned against her husband's shoulder, content in a way she had never known before. "Welcome home, Mrs. Caldwell," Vaughn said as they pulled up to the ranch house, which glowed warmly in the gathering dusk. "Home," Sophia repeated, savoring the word. "I like the sound of that." Vaughn lifted her from the wagon and carried her across the threshold, just as he had carried her into the saloon on that fateful day. But this time, instead of pain and fear, there was only joy and the promise of a future together. The years that followed brought changes to the Circle C ranch. With Sophia's careful management and Vaughn's hard work, the ranch prospered. They added more cattle, improved the house, and hired additional hands. Sophia's garden became the envy of the county, and her kitchen was always warm and welcoming to visitors. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived a year after their wedding, a sturdy, blue-eyed boy with his father's determined chin and his mother's quick smile. 2 years later came a daughter, Elizabeth, with dark curls and a spirit as free as the Texas wind. News occasionally reached them from Chicago. Richard Sullivan had indeed fallen from his lofty position, his empire crumbling under federal investigation. He died in prison 3 years after Sophia and Vaughn's wedding, unrepentant to the end. But by then, he was merely a shadow from the past, unable to touch the life Sophia had built. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Vaughn surprised Sophia with a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find a delicate silver locket. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny sketch of the Frontier Saloon, beautifully rendered by one of Sweetwater's few artists. To remember where our story began, Vaughn explained. Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. As if I could ever forget. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch swing that Vaughn had built the summer after they were married. The Texas night was alive with the sounds of cicadas and the distant lowing of cattle. Stars spangled the vast darkness above them, more than could ever be seen from a city street. "Are you happy, Sophia?" Vaughn asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. She thought about the question, about all the twists and turns that had brought her to this place and this man. About the day she had collapsed, wounded and desperate, on the steps of a saloon in a town she'd never heard of, and how a cowboy had picked her up and, true to his word, never let her fall again. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully, turning her face up for his kiss as the moon rose silver over the land they both loved. 10 years after their wedding, the Circle C Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the county. Vaughn and Sophia's partnership had proven as successful in business as it was in love. They had added a third child to their family, another daughter named Sarah, who had her father wrapped firmly around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. The town of Sweetwater had grown as well, with a proper school now instead of just the one-room schoolhouse where James and Elizabeth had started their education. The railroad had finally come through, bringing new opportunities for the ranchers and merchants alike. Sophia had even opened a small shop in town, selling her preserved fruits and handcrafted items that had become popular with travelers passing through. On a warm spring evening, as the family gathered on the expanded porch for supper, a rider approached the ranch house, a tall, dignified man in a well-cut suit that spoke of Eastern wealth. Vaughn stood, his hand moving instinctively to the gun he still wore when outside the house. Even after all these years, his protective instincts where Sophia was concerned had never diminished. "Can I help you, sir?" he called as the rider drew near. The man reined his horse to a stop and removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked dark hair and features that made Sophia gasp. "Michael," she whispered, rising from her chair. "Hello, Sophia," the man replied, his voice cultured but warm. "It's been a long time." "You know this man?" Vaughn asked, still watchful. Sophia nodded, her expression a mix of shock and happiness. "This is Michael Blackwood, my brother." "Michael, this is my husband, Vaughn Caldwell." Understanding dawned on Vaughn's face as he stepped forward to offer his hand. "Mr. Blackwood, this is unexpected. Please call me Michael." He dismounted and shook Vaughn's hand firmly. "And yes, I imagine it is. It took me quite some time to find you, Sophia." "Come inside," Sophia urged, overcoming her surprise. "Children, this is your Uncle Michael from Chicago. James, please take his horse to the barn." Over coffee in the comfortable living room, Michael explained his presence. "After Father died last year, I found letters in his desk, correspondence with Richard Sullivan. It seems Sullivan had been blackmailing him for years to keep him from helping you." Sophia's hands tightened around her cup. "Father knew I was innocent," he suspected, at least. "But Sullivan threatened to ruin him financially if he intervened." Michael's expression was grave. "I'm sorry, Sophia. He should have helped you regardless of the cost." "It was a long time ago," Sophia said softly, feeling Vaughn's hand cover hers in silent support. "Once I understood what had happened, I began searching for you. It wasn't easy, you covered your tracks well. But a federal marshal I spoke with remembered a case involving Sullivan's bounty hunters, and a woman matching your description in a place called Sweetwater, Texas." "And so you came," Vaughn finished. Michael nodded. "I had to see for myself that you were all right, and He hesitated to bring you this. He reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope which he handed to Sophia. Inside was a bank draft for a sum that made her eyes widen. Your inheritance, Michael explained. Father left the business to me, but he was explicit that you were to receive your full share of his personal estate, with interest. Sophia stared at the draft, emotions warring within her. The money represented a connection to a past she had long ago put behind her, but also an unexpected security for her children's future. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to decide anything now, Michael assured her. The money is yours, to use or not as you see fit. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, you weren't forgotten. Later that night, after Michael had been settled in the guest room and the children were asleep, Sophia and Vaughn sat before the dying embers in the fireplace, discussing the day's unexpected development. What will you do with the money? Vaughn asked, genuinely curious. Sophia considered the question. Some of it should be set aside for the children's education. James talks about going to university in Austin, and I want the girls to have that option as well. Vaughn nodded his agreement. And the rest? A slow smile spread across Sophia's face. I was thinking about that parcel of land adjoining ours to the east, the one with the stream running through it. Johnson's been talking about selling. Vaughn's eyebrows rose. Expanding the ranch. Why not? We've been talking about it for years. With this money, we could buy the land, build a proper dam for irrigation, maybe even start that horse breeding program you've been dreaming about. The look of love and pride in Vaughn's eyes made Sophia's heart swell. After all these years, he could still look at her as if she were the most remarkable woman he'd ever known. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, pulling her close, you continue to amaze me. Is that a yes? She asked, her eyes dancing with humor and affection. That's a definite yes. His kiss was as thrilling as it had been on their wedding day, filled with the deep understanding that comes from years of shared joys and sorrows. Michael stayed for 2 weeks, getting to know his nieces and nephew and developing a genuine respect for the life his sister had built. When he finally departed, it was with promises of future visits and invitations for the children to come to Chicago when they were older. He's a good man, Vaughn observed as they watched Michael's train pull away from the Sweetwater station. Yes, Sophia agreed. Different from our father. More open-hearted. She turned to her husband with a smile, rather like a certain cowboy I know. The expansion of the Circle C proceeded smoothly, and by the following spring, the new land had been incorporated into the ranch. The horse breeding program began with the purchase of a magnificent stallion from a renowned breeder in Kentucky. Transported west at considerable expense, but worth every penny for the quality he would bring to their stock. On a perfect autumn day 15 years after she had first collapsed on the steps of the Frontier Saloon, Sophia stood on the rise overlooking the ranch, her home. The main house, expanded and improved over the years, gleamed white in the afternoon sun. The new stables housed their growing herd of fine horses. Fields of hay stretched to the east, and cattle grazed on the rolling pastures beyond. Vaughn joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. At 45, he was still strong and vital, though silver now threaded his hair at the temples. The years of outdoor work had deepened the lines around his eyes and mouth, but to Sophia, he was more handsome than ever. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, following her gaze across their land. "I was just thinking about how different my life might have been," she replied. "If I hadn't run from Chicago, if the stagecoach hadn't been attacked, if I hadn't made it to Sweetwater that day, if I hadn't been headed to the saloon at that exact moment," Vaughn added softly. She turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. At 42, Sophia retained the beauty that had first caught his attention, enhanced now by the confidence and serenity that came from years of being truly loved. "You ever regret it?" she asked, picking up a half-dead stranger and getting involved in her troubles. Vaughn's laugh was warm and genuine. "Not for a single moment. Best decision I ever made, carrying you off those steps. Even with the bounty hunters and the danger and all the complications, especially with all of that." His eyes, still that startling blue that had first captured her attention, held hers with unwavering love. "Every bit of it brought us here to this life we've built together. I wouldn't change a thing." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sophia leaned against her husband's solid strength and knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a thing either. From the moment she had collapsed on those saloon steps and a cowboy had gathered her into his arms, her life had been on a path toward home, toward love, toward the kind of happiness she had never known was possible. And through all the years and all the changes, Vaughn had kept his unspoken promise. He had never let her fall again.